hey, I'm gonna help you let go of guilt and shame. That is a hard topic and a hard task, but I promise you will be able to find some inner security and find some self-love. Let me tell you some stories about some guilt and shame that I felt my whole life. Guilt, to me, it wasn't like I stole something and I was worried I was going to get in trouble. Guilt to me was more of the more I embraced parts of who I was and the life that I wanted, and I wanted to work towards certain aspects and certain milestones, I realized that there were certain people in my life that they needed me in the role that I was in. And for me to change and for me to become this next phase of my life, or for me to embrace maybe what my heart and my mind really wanted to do, I had to be okay disappointing and letting people down. And I realized that the people that I was letting down were people in my life that either were people of authority, people that I had given my power to, or people that I genuinely believed and were just holier than thou. I put them on a pedestal, and their validation of me was all I sometimes just wanted and needed. Or it was this weird situation of not feeling that I was enough. And a reason why I felt like I wasn't enough is because a lot of the things I was doing to limit myself to at times fit in. Shame and guilt is tough because sometimes it's programming and things that we have picked up over time that were based on the community and the village that we needed to survive around. But over time, as we get older and we get more accustomed to the path and the life that we're on, what happens is we end up becoming not isolated, but we're just on the track of life. And I was always chasing for my purpose. I was always trying to figure out where I was, or I was trying to run away from it. But I think over time, all the things that you do by instincts to survive, you realize sometimes were all the things that set you up for the place that you're at. And it either gave you a strength that you haven't realized is a strength, or you used something that is an innate power that felt like a double-edged sword. You know, like Elon Musk has his work ethic and mania, and he's able to really push through, and it's not like, you know, someone who's bipolar where it's, you know, it's so detrimental and it's imbalanced, because then he's going to have a severe depression. It's more of, you know, he has a sense of purpose. He just goes towards that at an intense intensity. And, you know, he's a bit of an outlier. And I feel like being a bit of an outlier came from also, you know, needing that sense of work, you know, that work or that solution to maybe get the validation he never quite felt. Not everyone has had that pain. My pain came from physical trauma, mental trauma, and also then just, you know, sexual trauma, you know. So my trauma was from the universe. It was just like my charts say, you know, I had Pluto in, I think, one of my Mars, or I don't know. It fucked up with a lot of really difficult things. And, you know, ultimately what allowed me to understand is that even though there was guilt and shame, there's all these weird things that, I sometimes internalized. None of it killed me. None of it destroyed me. I realized over time I was able to weather everything life threw at me, and I was able to overcome. So though I had guilt and shame, sometimes that guilt and shame was more about becoming who I really wanted to be, and realizing that there was a lot of people who knew me from an old perspective, and over time I just didn't want to play that role anymore. And I think that's something that we all feel. Sometimes that anxiety, sometimes that pressure, sometimes it's about doing it to help someone else, and sometimes it's that generational pain. It's that old trauma that we had once in life that we're still trying to break the pattern of the past, and sometimes that pattern may have already changed or evolved, and it's like we're giving a vaccine to something that our body already has the antibodies to. So we have to learn how to pivot. We have to learn how to realize that maybe the old pain and shame sometimes are even based around the wrong people that you even like, that you thought mattered. I had in high school, just a not really good friend, and I had a not really good partner who I was dating or talking to her, and they were shisty, and they were both like these fucked up protest behavior of, instead of just saying what they needed or needing more validation or attention, they just did horrible things to get attention and to feel a sense of need. I haven't talked to them in decades, but ultimately, I realized that, even for years, I kicked myself for allowing just not so many great people into my bubble and my field of protection that just had so much of their own baggage that honestly, I didn't really even know who they were. And ultimately their pain and their family pain, they were just screaming out for more help. And I was just like, I don't know you well enough to honestly deal with this. And I'm one where I do walk away from certain bonds the older I've gotten. And I think I need to be better about that. But the way I do that now is realize that I don't let other people's judgments or assessments or their viewpoints of me define who I am. Because ultimately they don't have the same perspective. Ultimately they're not in the trenches with me. They're not there with me. And even if they were, they wouldn't be saying the judgments that they have, because they would understand. And even then, we have different lives. We have different ways of internalizing things. So you can't let someone else's path be your own. And sometimes it's about learning that the shame and the guilt that we carry might not be our own. So you have to realize, are you carrying this because of someone else? So the worst example that I can give is, I have this, she's like a technical big sister, but they're old enough to probably be a young aunt, but super dysfunctional. And she was the type who would make fun of the younger kids and teens, and would just do all this stuff for attention, and I remember I was like 13, and at this point I was in this weird, like, chubby and just obese, not obese, but like I was healthy, but I had these like man boobs, and I just felt yucky, like I was just overeating my feelings. I was just in this awkward stage of just not quite grown into my body. And I remember we were doing this cultural dance, and I remember she just literally like, hey guys, look at him, and like would pick out body parts and would just shame me in front of all my peers and people around my age, and sometimes some of the younger elders. And it was just fucked up. And and as a kid I would just take it and just be like, man, that, like, I'm a horrible person, like I'm just less than. And I would let these insecurities, which I found out later, like it's their own baggage, but ultimately people who go around causing harm on purpose to feel better are not people that you just need in your life, you know? And those are the ones I cut. I give people enough chances, but over time, when people prove that they're just not a positive person who's willing to accept that we're all flawed and they want to just put you down to feel better, you just need to walk away from. Sometimes it's family, sometimes it's friends, sometimes it's current lovers, future lovers, but there's a type. And I read in this, Mars type report, and it talked about how, they did the simulations for Mars, and, when they had this high hysterical, this like unhealed, just hysterical group of within the population, and when that ratio got too high, it was causing just a lot of just difficulties, and society wasn't able to flourish. But over time, when that population just got minimized and they just became not something that was encouraged, like just supported, like society thrived and did much better. And sometimes we have to realize the burdens that we carry and the pain we carry are sometimes it's put on by people who just weren't able to go through their own. Like, I am a tough negotiator and I am very logical, especially when I get into a situation where it's for the survival of my team or the product. Like, I am just logic. And I will debate to the point where, I didn't always care about the reaction or how someone felt. And I would always feel guilty about that because I wouldn't do that in my personal life. And I only did it in business where, there was hierarchical stuff and it was about order and process and decision making. So I realized that, hey, you know what? I'm going to leave that in the business room, where if I need to challenge and I need to do it respectfully, I'll do it. But outside of corporate America, where money and power and all that stuff is happening, in our personal lives, people shouldn't be doing that. And honestly, neither in business. But not everyone wears their hearts on their sleeves, and people have a lot of hidden agendas. So you have to understand, is someone there have the same purpose, perspective, and do they want the same things as me? Because if they do, then listen. If they don't, then that's a burden you don't have to carry. So that is my long-winded way of explaining how to maybe let go of some of the guilt and the shame that you've picked up over the generations and the programming that people have told you. So again, I'm Saul Matthew of KoosKey. Bowen may be blessed with a long life. This content may be for you, maybe for someone else that you know. But so if you can, please share this and please subscribe and give me some feedback on how I can improve this for you all. Thanks so much. Bye.